Hello, my friends, and welcome to the Two Trees. We're here to talk about angels, demons, ghosts, the pagan gods, and the weird corners of the Bible. We're talking about the beliefs of the ancient world, the way that they talked about the supernatural world, all with a goal of helping you to understand the people and context of the Bible, to be able to engage on a deeper level with the text of Scripture. But most important of all, we are here to show you Jesus. As Deuteronomy 10:17 describes him, the Lord your God is the God of gods, the Lord of lords, mighty and awesome. I'm John Dillon, and I am here with my hosts, Martin the Listener.
Hey, everybody.
The Right Reverend Nick Church.
Hey, guys.
And Jacob.
Yes, sir. Let's go.
Hey-o.
I love the excitement that I'm here. This is good. I actually feel a little bit better. My throat's sore, and I sat in a dental chair for way too long today with
Did
my
you go
mouth
see a
open.
dentist?
Yeah, yes, I did. It was awesome.
That's why his cheeks look a little puffy.
Oh, it was. Yeah, I was numb, and I went to go to the store, and I'm gonna smile at people, and they just looked at me weird because I'm droopy mouth, and it was awesome. But as much as I talk, like my jaws are really sore right now because my mouth was open way too long.
I don't like dentists. If you're a dentist out there, it's not personal. It's just that you chose a creepy career.
You ever notice like they shake your cheek as in like you're going to be distracted, like, and I know exactly where they're going to drive that long needle into your nerve. You're like, ugh. Anyway, so I always want to just let out a really loud scream, but I don't want to with the needle, But I just for fun just scream really loud and let them jump. But anyway, I didn't do that.
That's all right. Nick, what have you been up to today?
Working.
Working?
Yes.
Yeah?
Sitting behind a desk.
Excellent.
Reading.
You reading anything good?
No.
That's a shame.
Facebook.
Oh gosh, you could at least learn something on TikTok. So
Well, I learned that we
I don't
have
think so.
some followers, some more
What
followers.
a wonderful segue. Yeah, you guys
Yes.
missed the segue. That
that's
was
what-
what he
No,
was
I
doing.
was trying to
That was
lead
great.
in.
we did
I was
it for
trying.
you.
Yeah.
Dang it.
Yeah.
Speaking of the Facebook
Ah,
page,
there it is.
there we are. Hey, if you're not following by now, I'm not sure what you're doing listening and not following us on Facebook. We did eclipse the 500 mark.
Thank
Thanks
you,
to
Jana Deaton.
Exactly.
Yes, who is
Shout-
that person?
Free shout outs there. We're actually climbing some more. So, John, shout you out if you follow us now. But the real thing that we're trying to get everybody to do is not just listen, not just follow us and get all this awesome information, but share it with everybody else. You can easily share it right there on Facebook by clicking the little button that says share, and you can post it to your own timeline there. But also put it on all your other social media outlets because that's how we're going to grow and get everybody else involved in what we're doing as well. So if you like us, share us. If you don't like us, still go ahead and share us because why not? Somebody else might
Yeah,
like
just
us.
say here's a podcast I don't like and just share it. It's great.
Hey,
That's fine,
I'm
too.
okay with that.
All publicity is good publicity for us at this point. So, again, go on there. It's free to do all of this. I know we made some jokes about getting free membership and stuff, but everybody does, no matter what. So hit the follow button and enjoy all the free stuff that John really puts out, and everybody else that's sitting around this table does help as well, too.
Yeah, thanks, guys. We are continuing our discussion tonight on the topic of territorial spirits. And this is a topic that's come up a couple of times as people have reached out to us with Messenger and email. And so we just thought, we would look at several different angles in the Bible where it discusses the idea of territorial spirits. And sometimes it's in stories that we're so familiar with that just taking a step back is helpful in recapturing the wonder of the stories. Oftentimes stories, especially ones that we're familiar with from childhood and on, we can just kind of rattle off as though there's nothing more to these stories than what the flannel graph board let us know once upon a time. But the truth of the matter is that the Bible is loaded with weird stuff. And in even the strangest corners, you will find odd things to be fascinated with. And so the text that we're going to be looking at today is in the book of 1 Kings. We're going to be looking at the story of Elijah and his showdown with the prophets of Baal on a mount called Carmel. Are we going with Carmel or Carmel?
My southern friends would say caramel. I mean,
Caramel?
Yeah, they really got on me when I say caramel from up north.
I'm not sure. It's
Jacob,
like pecan.
caramel.
Yeah.
Yes.
Same thing.
Yep. Same thing.
Well, this is Mount Carmel, and I didn't see any forms of candies when I was there. It was a really big hill, very beautiful, very filled with trees and forests and that kind of thing. It's kind of a national park now. Most of it is, but we're talking about the idea of supernatural powers. And just to give us a little bit of background here, we want to continue just digging into what exactly did ancient peoples believe about those supernatural beings. Did they think they were imaginary? Did they just believe in them? Did they see evidence of these things in their day-to-day lives? And Jacob has really been thinking about this quite a bit. And so he asked us to take a look at the book of Job here. And so I've pulled a couple verses here, Jacob, that will kind of walk us through this. And do you mind starting us out in Job chapter 1 and verse 6?
Yes, absolutely. It says, now there was a day when the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan, or Satan, also came along with them.
So the sons of God, that's Bene Ha-Elohim. That's the same phrase that you see in the book of Genesis chapter 6, where the sons of God come down to the daughters of men. And it's in reference to supernatural beings, the angelic courts, if you want to think of them that way. And apparently, there is a character called Satan, and there's a little bit of argument here as to whether this is the Satan or this is an office in heaven. But either way, this guy is no friend to Job. He is a supernatural power, and he says to God in verse 12 or rather right before 12, he says, listen, Job, if you would let me tempt him properly and reach out and just clobber him in the face, he would curse you and die. And Job chapter 1, verse 12, Jacob says, would you read that one too?
Yep. And the Lord said to Satan, behold, all that he has is in your hand. Only against him do not stretch out your hand. So Satan went out from the presence of the Lord.
Now, does that make you think, Jacob, that this being already has supernatural power, or that God is giving him here supernatural power?
Well, I mean, again, years ago, as I read this, I wondered as to what he was going to do, what was the game plan. But when you read through this and you ask yourself, was it the Satan that's doing these things, or was he asking God to do these things? For me, there's only two conclusions. Whether he's saying, okay, God, why don't you go ahead and do this thing, and then God does it, or he has power to do these things. And this helped kind of shape my mindset that these other beings or Elohim have power over at least some of the elements or weather or those kinds of things. Because when you read this, it's like, it seems like they're doing it. And I know that the fire of God fell from heaven is one of those things that's like, now we know that later on God does do this kind of thing, but I don't know if it's described as the fire from God. It seems like, God did it. But I really believe that this was something that was enabled by these other powers, which opens my mind up to a lot of other questions that we'll see and what we'll talk about today as well.
So it's almost like, is Satan asking for the power to be able to do this, or is he asking for the permission to be able to do this, right? That's kind of the argument.
So, we've argued it both ways. And in the end, guys, nobody here came up with a definitive Bible verse that said this is definitely what it is. But we have bounced it back and forth. And my attention was drawn to verses 18 through 19. Which have a very interesting phrase here that I think identifies the powers that are at work here. And so, Jacob, if you'll take that one again.
This is cool. It says, while he was yet speaking, there came another and said, your sons and daughters were eating and drinking wine in their oldest brother's house. And behold, a great wind came across the wilderness and struck the four corners of the house. And it fell upon the young people, and they are dead. And I alone have escaped to tell you.
Now, if we're reading this just as the guy happened to think about the direction that the wind was coming from, it's a really strange thing to have said. But if instead it is connecting to that idea of the wilderness as the proper dwelling of what they thought of as the evil powers,
right,
that the wilderness is a place of death, in my mind, this would seem to indicate that these beings do have power, that there are things that they can do. Now, I think they sell themselves as far greater than they actually are.
That's true.
For instance, the god Baal seems to have presented himself as the causer of storms, all of them. I don't think that's true. I think the water cycle is definitely a real thing. Does that mean that he cannot cause a storm?
I think it can.
I think that you have to come away and realize these beings are liars. That's true.
Yep.
But that doesn't mean they're powerless, that they can't do things. As a matter of fact, we know that they did things in the book of Exodus. We have recorded there that the magicians of Pharaoh's court were mimicking the plagues of Egypt until they became ceremonially unclean and couldn't enter into their temples anymore. And here in the book of Job, it seems to indicate again that the Satan figure here is wielding power, that these angels are more than just precious moments figurines. They're not just paper constructs, but they are supernatural powers all on their own. And I think that changes the way that we look at paganism a little bit. It isn't that these guys were stupid and were just worshiping any old thing that was out there, but there were beings that were presenting themselves at times and doing things that the ancient world looked at and saw only a god could do that.
So would that be something that we could kind of look at towards our physical attributes, if you will? So I didn't come out of the womb being able to bench press 100 pounds. But, if you work at it and you practice, all of a sudden you can become stronger with that. Mm-hmm. Would that be something how they can draw and work on their own powers and something? I know this is an impossible question to ask you, but is it similar to that? Like they have attributes that they were given at their creation, and they can maybe hone that craft or work on that craft, like that type of idea? Or is it solely that God controls how much power that they have at any given time?
I think each of them was created with ability and purpose, with different skill sets and different interests, just like humans develop that way. And so there may be spirits who are inclined more towards the forest and others that are more inclined towards the heavens. We just don't know. Mm-hmm. We are told, however, that they are real and that we are not to try to make peace with them or to have conversations with them because they're dangerous. It's don't go in here because there's a danger, not because they don't exist, but because this is something that we're at war with. Now, are they able to overpower God? Absolutely not. If God is with you, who can be against you? And so we're not going to be telling you, this is the spell to drive away this, that, or the other thing. We're going to tell you to put your trust in Jesus. But for pagan peoples who were outside of the covenant, they were prey to these things, and these beings were working in their lives.
We're asking, though, this is me to consider that these beings do have power. I do believe that it's that God can shut it off, can shut it down anytime that He wants, and I believe that's kind of what's going to happen in our story today. But they do have power, and I think that as we know that, we know we're not dealing with fictitious things that people try to scare us with, or these movies. We're actually dealing with real beings. And the fact that we have territories in the Deuteronomy 32 worldview, and there's wars and fights, and there's all kinds of things that seem to parallel with the human world, help us to really look at our worldview through a biblical lens and help. I think it helps me change how I think about what's happening in our nation, even here and all over the world, and how things might unfold. Because I know we haven't talked about Psalm 82 at all, but there is going to be judgment to these rulers over the nations, and God's going to take care of them. But
that's right.
It seems like as Jesus leaves and he leaves and says, "Go make disciples of all nations," He left those rulers in place, and we are to go into all these spaces and to rescue people out of their dominion of darkness. And it's really neat. And you look at the language of ambassador and all those things in the Bible, but all of this, the idea of powers and them having powers and their territories, I think it gives you a different. For me, it gives me a different worldview.
Yeah, ancient cities believed that they had a patron god or goddess that was there, that paid special attention to them. And you have the idea as you travel throughout the Middle East and you look at different temple structures that they believe that these sites were sacred sites to that particular being, that there was a god or goddess that was especially present in this place or in that way. And so the ancients, this was just the way that they thought. It was the world that they lived in. And for us who live in a scientific world, we like to poo-poo that stuff and just say, well, that's just superstition. But to the ancient peoples, this was just as real as traffic is to us. It was something that was a fact. And so when you have this battle between Baal and Yahweh, this is something that the ancient peoples didn't think, well, obviously Yahweh's going to win. To them, Baal was a very real threat, and they were worshiping him as a rival to Yahweh. They were believing the propaganda that was being put out by Jezebel and by these false prophets and things that were floating around out there.
And that was kind of a conversation we had the other night at house church when we were talking. Is like, why would somebody follow Baal over Yahweh? Because, you know, they had seen the people come out of Egypt, and they had seen the power and might of Yahweh, and then all of a sudden they go to this Baal character. There had to have been something reciprocated back to them, some kind of power or some kind of, you know, something given to the person on earth for them to be like, yeah, I'll go with Baal over him.
And I think in our rush to defend the glory of God, we've denied things that the ancients just took for granted. That there are demonic powers out there, and you shouldn't mess with them. They're stronger than you are. They're not nearly as strong as God is. I mean, you look in the Bible, anytime people encountered an angel, like Sisera's army, right, when they're marching, like one angel wipes them out. Like, these are beings of immense power. Whether it's loyal to God or it's disloyal to God, it doesn't change the nature of the being is stronger than mankind. And there are lots of these gods. In Mesopotamia, you know, they're worshiping the god Marduk or Bel. In Greece, they're worshiping the god Zeus and, Hera and Poseidon. But in most of Canaan, the god that kept coming up for the Israelites is a god named Baal. And Baal had lots of names, Baal Zephon, or Baal this, or Baal that. And it was a religion that we actually know a ton about because we have found his ancient texts. There was a whole Baal cycle. If you're interested in it, you can read it online. It's absolutely free. And it's entertaining. But this is what the ancient peoples believed about Baal. Now, the word Baal means Lord or Master. And you see it in people's names like Jezebel, or later on in world history, Hannibal. That means the grace of Baal. These are people who were worshiping this god, and he presented himself as a god of thunder and rain, fertility in the fields and weather. He was the kind of guy that made the seasons turn. And they worshipped him as somebody who brought wealth and fertility to the land. A goddess that seems to have gone hand in hand with the worship of Baal is something called an Asherah. And in Ugaritic literature, that's one of those Canaanite cities that was worshiping Baal. Ugaritic literature seems to indicate that the goddess name it means the trampler or the walker, both of which seem creepy to me. And the Bible talks a lot about Asherah and Baal.
Yeah, it seems like if I was reading through the Bible, these are two that continue to come up
Over and over.
Yeah. Again, I wonder if I always wonder, like, were these people idiots? Would they have like really pretty statues and it's like, oh, this must, or did these things deliver or seem to deliver some kind of promise or power that these thousands of people that would turn to them? I was just reading in 2 Kings 23 where it talks about, I think it's Josiah who starts to clean house, and they had, it says that they had to remove from the temple of the Lord all the articles made for Baal and Asherah and all the starry hosts. It's like, let's move these in here right next to God's stuff too. It's like, let's make a storehouse of all the potential gods.
Yeah, they wanted to just add Baal next to Yahweh.
Right.
Can't we all just get along? Your God and my God all in one place. And the Lord says, no, you shall have no other God besides me. That these are not my rivals. These are my subjects. They're in rebellion against me. It is not okay for you to turn your eyes to the heavenly host and worship any of them as me. And so this is about whose people are you?
Is there an image that's common for Baal?
Yes, he's kind of a skinny-legged, big-hatted, thunderbolt-throwing fellow. You can Google him. There's some statues and things of him. But I want to look at a couple passages in the Scripture that are going to link Baal and Asherah together. So, Nick, do you mind hitting 2 Kings 17, verses 16 through 17?
And they abandoned all the commandments of the Lord their God and made for themselves metal images of 2 calves. And they made an Asherah and worshipped all the most of heaven and served Baal. And they burned their sons and their daughters as offerings and used divination and omens and sold themselves to do evil in the sight of the Lord, provoking him to anger.
So, what kind of gods are they worshiping here? Are these lovable, sweet and cuddlies?
This is sick.
Yeah.
This
I guess
is-
it's dark.
This is very dark.
Did they feel that these gods required
Yes.
the blood of their children? Was this a symbol of how serious they were to get what they wanted from these powers?
Yeah, I think it's exactly what
It's,
it
I
was.
mean, it's amazing to me, and I wonder
For a
if
father or a mother to
who would do
to
it.
ultimately betray their child like that to the darkness is twisted, and it's sick, and that's what Baal was. That's what the Asherah were.
Now, to interject, though, what about when Abram's going up?
That was
the
going to
mountain.
ask that same question.
You know,
Well, and that's
these
the same
guys
thing.
are.
Yeah. So
these
God's-
guys think that the people that they are, giving these sacrifices to are good people. The same way maybe Abram thought that with Yahweh. I just is there.
Maybe that's why Abram wasn't so freaked out about the request.
I
That
think-
wasn't uncommon.
I think the whole point of it, though, is that God says, "No, this is not
Right.
what I am."
I'm going to be different.
It's
I
not
am
about
different.
saying, "Yeah, I'm just like that." The whole point of it is to say that I am unlike these things.
So God is wanting him to be attentive enough to go to that length,
That's right.
but then God says, "No, that's not what I'm about."
God provides the sacrifice.
Yeah.
And that's what he will do for us in the
Preach
end
it.
with Christ, is he'll come himself. But I want you to notice a couple things in this text. First of all, the depravity that's involved here. I mean, this is human sacrifice. That's what the priests of Baal are involved in, whether it's captives or it's women or it's children, or it doesn't matter. But this is gross. And you have, again, that they have set up for themselves golden cows. How many?
2.
Two, one in the north and one in the south, and they're worshiping the hosts of heaven. And then it says that they sold themselves to do evil in the sight of the Lord. And my question would be, sold themselves to who?
Yeah.
To the evil.
Yeah, they,
The Illuminati.
yeah,
What?
they
I
are
didn't-
purposefully becoming the servants of these beings. Yeah,
I didn't notice that it says all. They worshipped all the host of heaven and served Baal. I've never noticed that one.
yeah. It's as though it's a package deal. You get one, and you open the door for the whole thing.
I'm sure Creator God is included in that, but not exclusive.
Yeah, I think that's probably true. God has no time for this. He's
Yeah.
very clear about his role with these false gods. In particular, there's a text in Deuteronomy, Deuteronomy 16, 21 through 22. Martin, will you grab that one?
Yeah, sure. You shall not plant any tree as an Asherah beside the altar of the Lord your God that you shall make. And you shall not set up a pillar which the Lord your God hates.
Now, this is interesting to me on a podcast called The Two Trees. And we have spent a lot of time trying to talk about how trees are woven into ancient worship. And in the ancient world, you had two trees, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil and the tree of life. The worship of Asherah was tree-based. They would carve a tree trunk to look like the goddess or put a human face in it. And the idea that you get is that it was under these trees that they would worship the darkness. They would put up lots of them so that you created a grove, or sometimes they would plant the trees. And in these groves, among these trees, they are worshiping the darkness. And the Lord says, absolutely not. There will be no Asherah near me. You will not put these or plant these next to my altars, or set up pillars, which they did all over the place. Jacob, you and I saw a bunch of them when we were there. They never stopped doing this.
Yep. And they're still all over the world today too. I mean, they're everywhere. And the word obelisk is this kind of parallel to an Asherah, like
Yeah, so Asherahs seem to have been poles of wood.
okay,
That they were made
never
of
stone.
I guess they could have been, but the idea was that it was a living thing.
Okay,
The implication that we get here in the Bible is that they were setting up trees
So just to clarify,
or eights.
So Baal and Asherah are two separate
Yeah,
things.
they go together, though. Wherever you see one, you find the other.
Okay, all right.
But they are different.
Because in the Mount Carmel, there was 450 prophets of Baal and 400
Yep.
of Asherah.
That's right.
Okay.
They're kind of a package deal. Wherever you find the one, the other is close at hand. Their stories are linked. And so Jezebel is very interested in both of these things and in trying to get the people to switch their loyalty from the God that made them and redeemed them to this false God, to this fallen watcher who is presenting himself as Baal. Now, Baal, this is his story. You may not know who Baal is. And so let me tell you, the myth of Baal. Is this true? Absolutely not. This is his propaganda. This is what he was trying to pitch to the people. And so the ancient Canaanites believed that the boss god was named El. And that's a really descriptive word, and it just means God. And that his son's name was Baal. And Baal was a fighter. He was ferocious. And when there was this evil god called Yam, who was the god of the sea and the chaos waters, and he has all these monsters that serve him, Leviathan and all this creepy stuff. And Baal goes to battle with Yam and overpowers this evil chaos monster and all of his henchmen. And he turns the power of the chaos waters or the seas into positive uses of water. And so Baal conquers the chaos waters and brings rain. He conquers the wilderness and brings abundance of crops. And so Baal is a hero in the eyes of the Canaanites. They really liked this guy.
Sounds like a great movie, honestly.
Yeah, I'd watch it. He's a storm god. He's associated with the rains and with fertility of the land. But in Israel, you guys may not know this, it only rains 2 months out of the year. They have a rainy season. We don't have one of those here in Ohio. It's rainy season, game on, all the time. We're set for rain. But in Israel, it's not that way. It only rains for a season. And so what the ancient Canaanites did is they had to ask themselves, well, where did Baal go? He was here. He was throwing lightning bolts and he was bringing rain and everything was awesome. And then he disappeared. And so they made up a story about this, that Baal actually battled against the god of death. And he died and he got sucked into the underworld. And while he was there, he became the god of the dead and then sprang back up in the spring. And he kind of was like this cyclical cycle. Every year he dies and every year he fixes the situation again. And so it was a god who was connected with both the heavens and the underworld. Interesting. One of the names that's given to Baal is he's called Baal Rapha'u or Raphaim. And for those of you guys who have been with us for any of the giant stuff, Rephaim should jump right off the page at you. This comes out of Dictionary of Deities and Demons, but it says very clearly that Baal is connected with the Rephaim. And the Rephaim are the ghosts of the deceased demonic beings that were born from the Genesis 6 debacle, and that they looked to Baal as their king. And so he was the Lord of the dead, and had all this creepy, underworld connotations to him, which is probably why they are sacrificing their people to Baal. And so when you look at this guy, he may look, all shiny and nice, but he has a flip side of the coin as well, which is just filled with graveyards, death, and this really vibrantly disgusting underworld worship that was going on. And so Baal was a god both to be connected with necromancy and a god to bring the crops. He was the god that you would want to shout down into the caves and whisper into the underworld to catch Lord Baal's attention. Or you might look up into the heavens, that he could be in either place. And so he's definitely a creepy character. You guys are aware with this? Yeah, are you following me?
Yeah.
I was thinking about being at the gates of hell. Is that connected to Baal?
I don't know. They're at Caesarea Philippi.
Yeah. That's what was just in my head as you were talking about this, the God of the underworld.
Yeah, so we know that there were Canaanite worship taking place at Caesarea Philippi, but I've not studied that. Judd
There's a
Burton
connection.
would probably be the guy to know more about that. I'll ask him,
Okay.
and we'll find out. But the story of Baal in the Bible is connected to one particular mountain, and it's called Mount Carmel. Now, Mount Carmel is a mountain that is associated with Baal. It's a mountain that would get lots of rain coming off of the Mediterranean Sea, and Carmel actually means the mountain of the orchard or the garden.
Sounds like the Garden of Eden.
That's exactly what I thought when I read that too. So this is kind of like a demonic counterfeit.
Yeah, an imposter. Mm-hmm.
And this place, this was holy to the worship of Baal from ancient times. And it went on way after the Elijah story. When we were in Israel, they took us up to Masada, and I was totally creeped out by the whole Masada story. Nick, you would have loved it. It had all this Roman ruins and stuff. It was right up your alley. But I had a hard time with it. So I came back, and I was like, maybe I'm not giving them enough. I just need to get more into the story. So I read a book about Josephus and the Jewish war, and it had this line in it that I had never heard before, but Josephus talks about how Vespasian, after the death of Jesus, went to Mount Carmel, and one of the priests of Baal makes a prophecy over Vespasian. And so even after the life of Jesus, people are still worshiping Baal on this mountain. It makes you wonder, like, why that place? Why is that place so connected to that being?
You would think game over after this story of Elijah too. I mean, there's definitely a prove or a conquering, and then the slaughter of the prophets as being. I would think it'd be over. Like, okay, Baal's over with. Now we're gonna find something else.
If ever there was one place where we know Baal is not in charge,
right.
It would be this place. Where God has just dominated and made Baal look a fool. But apparently they just shuffled that off and kept right along worshiping Baal as though that had never happened.
Well, and it makes you just think of like why there would be any power behind his name, like you guys were mentioning before. But you said the word earlier, propaganda, and it's like there's propaganda maybe coming from these spiritual creatures themselves, but then also of people. If the stories were exaggerated from generation to generation or person to person through the telephone game, you could see where someone might believe, like, oh, man, this Baal guy seems pretty cool. Like, let's start to follow him. And then, you get maybe a mob mentality of more and more people that are believing. And so there has to be some form of propaganda also on earth that is spreading the word about these people, because it's hard for me to understand why people would believe in the first place about these guys, but then continue to go back and back and back. Like, it's okay, like, maybe the first time you say, okay, I understand, it's a new guy, and it explains these, weather phenomena that we're going through. But then all of a sudden you see him get defeated time and time again, and yet people are still running right back to him.
So what really made this come alive for me was thinking of Baal as an underworld deity. I'd always thought of him as a storm god, and that was basically it. And then when I started researching and found this whole other element to it, it makes sense to me. If these people are trying to speak to the dead and they're reaching into the veil, trying to talk to demonic beings, those demonic beings want to talk as well. They have things to say, and they're not going to glorify God. They're going to promote a lie. Mm-hmm. They're going to promote their Lord as the Lord that truly should be worshipped. And so it makes sense to me that a people could fall right back into this, because the demonic beings that they're worshiping and wanting to communicate with aren't gone. They were just shown to be not what they were presented themselves as.
Yeah, when you think of them being defeated, they didn't leave the battlefield.
Right.
They just proved where they rank on the battlefield.
So then the question would be, why does God go to Mount Carmel to have this showdown with Baal? Well, first of all, you got the people who don't think Baal is real, right? That he's just an imaginary character and these guys are dumb. If Baal is real, that he is a demonic spirit, and this is where he set up his court, The idea of Jesus just kicking open the doors and being like, scoot over, boys, I'm here to show you guys what's going on, is a total boss move where he walks into the enemy's territory to show himself superior to anything that's going on there. And we know that God has already done this in Egypt, in Exodus 12:12, where it talks about that he's come to perform judgment on the gods of the nations. He's doing the same thing again on Mount Carmel, except this time it isn't the gods of Egypt, it's the gods Baal and Asherah. He does this again later with the Babylonians, with Daniel and the stuff that we talked about last time. And so the question that comes up is, who can stand before the rightful king?
None.
Nobody.
Yep.
This is what this story is about. It's not the emphasis on the existence of demonic powers. They're there. But in the presence of light, shadow disappears. And in the presence of the word of God, the voices of the darkness fell silent. And this instance is a moment where you just want to reach up and shout, the Lord is God, along with the people, because God proved himself to be what Baal was pretending to be.
And this time too, later on you'll see Elijah say everyone has kind of been he feels kind of alone where he's at. The majority of people seem to have been worshiping the Baal and Ashtaroth. And you see over and over again in the Bible, like in Judges 2 or Numbers 25, they tend to start worshiping the Baal, and God's anger is arose. And it is a boss move. He comes in on Baal's territory, totally dismantles his power, and he's going to take care of business and then take out all the prophets.
Yeah.
Done.
I mean, it just makes you look at God as a conquering king, not just gentle Jesus, meek and mild, but as a Lord fit for battle, that the Lord is a warrior, not to destroy the kingdoms of men, but that his enemy is not flesh and blood either, that he died for the sins of humanity. But there are powers who he will throw down and that are going to be ultimately broken. And it's a territorial spiritual story that this mountain, this false Garden of Eden, orchard on the mountain, is going to experience the coming of God in a way that it never had before.
And that's something that I really, kind of resonate with, because being a sports guy, if you look at the NBA Finals are going on right now, and if you look at the amount of times the home team wins during that, it's a lot more than the away team. And so there's like this strange phenomena of momentum, and like there's just this rally behind because you have your home crowd there, and there's a lot of energy, and there's a lot of this, that, and the other. And God says, I don't need all of that extra energy and all that momentum. He goes into the away team and obliterates him, right? And so that's something that really speaks to me, because I can relate that to something that I've experienced personally and enjoy. And so it's like, I don't need this home field advantage. I don't need this. Everywhere is my home field.
Well, it seems like everyone probably was rooting for the prophets of Baal.
Right.
And there's 450 prophets of Baal, 400 Ashtaroth, and then you have everyone who's pretty much Benoni, and it was Elijah versus all. And I could imagine being there. Like, I'd sometimes like to put myself in the story, and it seems like Elijah's got his feet kicked up because he knows something's about to happen.
So my question then would be, what did it look like in the supernatural world on this mountain? We have seen God descend on the mountain before, on Mount Sinai, in fire and smoke. We've seen the host of heaven unveiled and revealed in things that were going on. I think it would blow your mind to have seen this in the spiritual world.
Well, it's interesting,
the court of the Lord seems to have been right there.
But some of the spiritual beings that, were not in rebellion against God, they're on God's side. But when they see him going down and there's all these people rooting against him, they got their T-shirts and their face painted and they're saying, go Baal. And, God is going in there. These spiritual beings.
I just got like a image of like Bugs Bunny.
Space Jam action, But still, was there ever a doubt in those spiritual creatures that were, for God? Were they like, oh man, can he overtake all of that? Like, was there ever that spot? And then, man, the victorious, shout when it's done. It's like, oh, it's just, what were they feeling and going through?
So but right before this goes down, Elijah already shows up and says it's not going to rain until we say so. So at that point in time, Baal, who's supposed to create all this weather and rain and stuff, has been shut down.
Right.
And now we're going to see the match, and everyone's coming. Everyone's coming. I don't know what kind or size of crowd it was, but I imagine it was a It was. I
a
would
big
love
one.
to see it. Yeah.
Yeah, and so
Everybody.
if ever there was a being or a place where Baal should have felt at home, this is his mountain. This is his place. This is the orchard on the mountain. This is by the sea. This is where the rains come. And so Elijah kind of just says, hey, we'll go where you're comfortable, right? We'll go knock on Baal's front door, see if he's home, and ask him if he could drop some rain by. I mean, that's what he does, right? That's what his whole point is. He is the one who brings the rain. And you just get this concept that the heavens are mocking the enemies of God, that later on Elisha is going to be surrounded by the chariots of fire, by the armies of God. And I think that this prophet also is protected. He's gone right into the lion's den, so to speak.
You guys ever thought about like why the showdown wasn't we'll see which God brings the rain? I mean, we need some rain here, not fire. You know, I don't know. I just thought about that. Like, let's see who can bring some rain, because that doesn't happen till afterward. But it's like, let's see which one can consume this offering here. You know, I don't know why I thought that.
Yeah,
but
so
I think we'd rather have some water.
Yeah, I would rather have water, but I think the concept was to show that you were receiving the offering, that we are in faith. We have given you something and you've received it. It wasn't just enough for the gods to be up there doing what they do. You had to show that you had a relationship with this God and that he was open to a conversation and a relationship with you. So let's jump then into the 1 Kings story. And we'll start in verse 17. And I'll stop you every once in a while when we hit something that I think is interesting.
Martin, you read it. Yes.
All right. When Ahab saw Elijah, Ahab said to him, "Is it you, you troubler of Israel?" And he answered, "I have not troubled Israel, but you have, and your father's house, because you have abandoned the commandments of the Lord and followed the Baals."
All right, so this is why. It's not raining, and it's not raining because I said so. It's not raining because you stink. That's why. And last week we talked about what a prophet was. A prophet was someone who stood in the counsel of the Lord and brought the message from the Lord to the earthly courts. And so he's saying, look, I didn't invent this. This isn't my idea. And you've been trying to murder me for the last 4 pages. And so I'm interested in this getting on and getting over with, but let's keep going.
"Now therefore send and gather all Israel to me at Mount Carmel, and the 450 prophets of Baal and the 400 prophets of Asherah, who eat at Jezebel's table."
Now, what does that mean that they eat at Jezebel's table?
They're servants of her.
Yeah, she takes care of them.
Yeah.
Jezebel, again, has, even though it's spelled B-E-L, is B-A-A-L. This is the god Baal. She's named after him.
I think it's awesome just to take note of this. Not only has God hidden Elijah as he's trying to find him, but he's just straight up bossing the king around. Like, he's telling him what to do. And there's not this just like, hey, who do you think you are? I'm the king.
There's this really weird story with a guy called Obadiah that happens before this, and we're not going to get into it today. But I would encourage everyone listening to this podcast to read this whole chapter.
Yeah, dig into
because I'd like to know why God reveals Elijah to Obadiah and not just straight to Ahab.
Yep.
There's this weird thing that happens, but I'm curious about your opinions out there, guys, so maybe you can tell me. Let's keep going.
So Ahab sent to all the people of Israel and gathered the prophets together at Mount Carmel. And Elijah came near to all the people and said, "How long will you go limping between two different opinions? If the Lord is God, follow him. But if Baal, then follow him." And the people did not answer him a word.
Cowards. So the Lord, that's Yah, and God is El, so that's Elijah, which is kind of Elijah's name. So it's an interesting connection here. His very name is the point of what they're trying to get them to say, that the Lord is God. There is no God like him. He is the God of gods, and everyone must bow to him. Every knee can bow, and every tongue confess that he is Lord. So jump down to verse 26.
And they took the bowl that was given them, and they prepared it, and called upon the name of Baal from morning until noon, saying, "O Baal, answer us." But there was no voice, and no one answered. And they limped around the altar that they had made. And at noon Elijah mocked them, saying, "Cry aloud, for he is God. Either he is
not he is God.
He is a God.
There we go.
Either he is musing, or he is revealing himself, or relieving himself."
Yeah, he's on the pot. He's probably
must
in
be
the
going to the
bathroom,
bathroom,
guys.
yeah.
You know, Give him a minute.
Had a rough night.
He's having a divine bowel movement. He'll be out when he's done.
He's got the paper.
Maybe he's on a journey. Keep going.
Or he is on a journey. Or perhaps he is asleep and must be awakened. And they cried aloud and cut themselves after their custom with swords and lances until the blood gushed out upon them. And as midday passed, they raved on until the time of the offering of the oblation.
Mm-hmm.
But there was no voice. No one answered. No one paid attention.
Now, does that mean that Israel wasn't paying attention?
They were watching.
They were watching. Who
Were they
wasn't?
expecting a voice?
Yeah,
Was there a voice that happened at times? Or
apparently.
yeah,
They,
this is what I never considered. It's like
they
of
were
course there wasn't a
wondering,
voice.
where are you? Where are you? You speak to us, but now you're silent. They were expecting him to come in fire, and they're pouring out blood. They're cutting themselves, and there are sacrifices being made. But no matter how loud they cry, there is no answer from their God. The only voice they hear is Elijah, and he's being a jerk. And I love him for that.
I love it too.
His
Sarcasm
spiritual,
is great.
sarcastic
Yes.
gifting here comes into play.
I knew it was a spiritual gift. I knew it.
Well, something that I'm kind of putting together with this is, Baal has power, or it has the ability to do certain things.
We think so.
Well, and it kind of reflects on me the same way that we have the ability to do certain things. And I don't mean, we can run fast or we can talk loud or we can do whatever. But you think of like how we love one another. The reason that we can love one another is because why? Because God loved us first. And so if you're thinking about Baal, the reason that he can do these special things, like cry out to them and give them power, is because God gave him the power first. Is there a connection that goes along with that? And so now all of a sudden he's unable to perform for these people.
Mm-hmm.
You think he's sitting up there like, man, I really want to, but I just don't feel like I should. I feel like, and this is just me speculating perhaps, but that the power that he was granted is now taken away. Like he is no longer able to perform these duties because God is not providing the power to him anymore. And it's kind of the same way that we are. If we think that we're the ones that's providing the love and we're the ones that's doing that, all of a sudden we're going to come up short, and it comes in our time that we need it the most. And so that's kind of where I'm taking this, is like Baal is doing this only because he's got it from the Almighty. And now all of a sudden Almighty says, it's my time to shine, not you. And so you don't have the authority anymore. You don't have the power to do it anymore.
What do you think, Nick? Do you think that Baal is providentially hindered here? Or do you think that Baal just is like, what do you think is going on? How do you view this?
At just first glance, I think he was probably hindered.
So you think he's there,
Yeah.
or whatever being is representing himself?
I think he's held back.
The light has stepped into the darkness, and the darkness cannot prevail. I always think God had him in this like arm bar up there. I know I could get into a crazy thought process, but
Well, I mean, that has to be the case, because
So just kind of running this in a different direction. When you go into a house, and Nick, you've shared a little bit about doing house cleansings and things like that. When you go into the space of a territorial spirit and you ask God's presence to come, and they report back, we haven't had any further instances of that. Like, do you view that as similar to this, or what do you think is happening in the spiritual world there?
I guess I've never really thought about it that way.
I'm curious.
Yeah. I'm curious too.
I mean, the only other option is that Baal realizes that he can't beat Yahweh, so he chooses not to do something, right? I mean, that's the only option. Either God stops him from doing it, or he willingly says, I surrender. I know I'm beat, so I'm not going to even try.
we're assuming that God has told Elijah to create this challenge, and he's coming in with him. I mean, we're assuming, because we don't really see that in
Right.
the text.
There's not a verse that says this, but
As a prophet.
it's implied
Yeah.
in the
Okay.
text. Yeah. So there is no voice. No one's answering. And so Elijah then prepares an altar with 12 stones, one for each of the tribes. And then he pours water over top of it, 12 buckets of water. Again, you get the idea of one for each tribe. And then he looks up in the heavens, and verse 37 is where I want to start.
Answer me, O Lord, answer me, that this people may know that you, O Lord, are God, and that you have turned their hearts back, And the fire of the Lord fell and consumed the burnt offering, and the wood and the stones and the dust, and licked up the water that was in the trench.
Isn't that a bit overkill?
It is. Like just created a large hole.
Yeah, it ate the rocks.
Everything just melted and consumed. But it's a display of God's power.
So what did the rocks represent?
The 12 tribes.
What should they have pulled away from that?
We're in trouble if we don't turn.
Yeah, that's exactly what they should have pulled away from that. Like those rocks, like you would have thought the offering may be in trouble, but the rocks, those are safe as houses. And then the rocks themselves are gone. The fire of God consumed them, and the water that had been poured on. Whatever defenses you've got, the Lord is here. And this should have been a smack in the face for the Israelites to realize that their God was there.
How cool would it have been if, as Moses grabbed these rocks, he said the family name and then put it down. And he said the family name, like, here's Gad, here's Judah, I can just set them down. And then it's consumed.
And then it was...
Because their reaction, I mean, would it be mine as well if I saw something like this happen? I'm going to fall on my face as well.
So the people see it. Pick up verse 39 there, Martin.
And when all the people saw it, they fell on their faces and said, "The Lord, He is God.
Elijah.
The Lord, He is God."
Yeah, they're crying out. It's actually backwards. It's Yah-El. But the idea is that this is Him. They are on their faces. They're not limping between two opinions now. And Elijah says to them, go ahead.
"Seize the prophets of Baal, let not one of them escape." And they seized them, and Elijah brought them down to the brook Kishon and slaughtered them there.
Now, if these are just misled fellas, isn't this a bit overkill?
Yeah.
The idea is that these men are dangerous. What they are doing is dangerous. What they represent is dangerous. It's not just wrong, it's evil. And that these people belong to these spirits. And so Elijah makes sure that they don't escape. Look down to verse 41.
And Elijah said to Ahab, "Go up, eat and drink, for there is a sound of the rushing of rain." So Ahab went up to eat and to drink, and Elijah went up to the top of Mount Carmel.
Now, this is a weird phrase. Jacob and I were talking about this the other day with our friend Rosemary and Jeremy, and she asked about this, and I've been thinking about it ever since.
It's weird. It's just a weird request. It's for him to go eat and drink. Again, it's here for a reason. So we had to pause and we were walking through and talking about this a little bit. It is certainly a weird phrase.
Yeah, it interrupts the whole story. Yep. You would assume that you would go right from the falling of fire to here's the rain. Why do you pause and tell me that Elijah was like, "Listen, Ahab, you look hungry. Why don't you go and eat something?
You look famished.
You could use a bite to eat. So you go sit down, my friend, and I'll go wait for the rain. You get yourself something nice to eat. Go back up on the mountain and have yourself a bite."
Is there a side of like David did with Saul, this sense of honoring a king, realizing that even though he's a wicked king, that God put him in place, that God has placed.
I think that's part of it.
I kind of see that little piece of it, but it's still weird.
I think there's
what kind of relationship do they have here?
I think there's an Eden connection here.
Yeah.
That remember what was that mountain? It was the mountain of the orchard. And now it was the garden where God had come down.
He went up to eat.
And he's telling Elijah, he said, "Go up there and eat. Go up there and be refreshed in the garden of abundance." This place that had been dark and filled with the worship of Baal has now experienced the coming of God. And his power has been flexed and revealed.
So you're saying Ahab goes up to the mountain to eat and drink?
He goes up, is what it says. He goes up.
It says.
So why does it indicate that Elijah went up to the top of Mount Carmel?
Well, he goes all the way up.
So he goes to the top.
To the top. Yeah, most of the time the gardens would have been on the slopes. Like, you're not going to have the garden all the way at the tip top.
Can we go back, like at the last verse? I don't know why, for some reason, I just saw this, is that the gods were brought down to the brook of Kishon. Why weren't they just slaughtered right there? Like, why would they take the time to, like, all right, everybody get in line?
It's almost like they were taken out of the garden.
Okay. Yeah. Was there any significance of this brook or whatever?
It's also off to the east of the mountain.
Oh, all these symbolisms.
Yeah, and so in the Garden of Eden, they are exiled
cast
from
out to the east.
Out to the east. And so this
It's not
seems to be
significant.
kind of a repeated pattern. That this
Coincidence.
Coincidence, exactly the same, obviously.
All these echoes throughout the Old Testament is just phenomenal. And again, if you don't slow down, you don't see them. And I mean, I didn't even see this until you just said it, but that's really cool.
Let's jump here. We're running out of time, and we want to be consistent with our 1 hour marker.
Go over.
If we
Let's
can.
go over.
But let's wrap up the story here in 1 Kings 18, 45 through 46.
And in a little while, the heavens grew black with clouds and wind, and there was a great rain. And Ahab rode and went to Jezreel, and the hand of the Lord was on Elijah, and he gathered up his garment and ran before Ahab to the entrance of Jezreel.
Nobody seeing this cloud thought to themselves, "Oh, Baal is here."
Mhm.
They looked up there and they thought, "Yahweh rides the storms. This is the God who has come again." Baal was put in his place. This territorial spirit, who would later on continue to be worshipped in this place, is a pretender. But the Lord our God is the God of gods, the Lord of lords, mighty and awesome. It's pretty clear when you're reading this. This is the Lord redeeming himself, vindicating his own name, and making sure that the whole world knew that Baal was nothing compared to him. So I don't know if these are things that you guys had noticed before in the story. I think a lot of people don't know really who Baal is. They've got an idea that he's a bad guy, but I hope this was helpful.
I know we kind of ignored this, but Elijah just went to like this super fast sprinter, runner, marathon. I don't even know what's going on here, but he's had a long day. Now, maybe he had his feet up and stuff, but I mean, that's a big day, and he's now outrunning a chariot.
Well, that's what I was going to say when he says, go up and eat, and then he goes to the top of the mountain. Same way Jesus wanted to be with the Father, kind of to re-energize himself, spiritually, physically. I wonder if that's what Elijah was trying to do too. Like, hey, I got a big run ahead of me here. I need some energy. So perhaps.
So our tour guide had some interesting thoughts here. He thought that the chariot just didn't do well in the rain, and so maybe he was out there mudding.
So being in Iraq, that's very possible, meaning that when it gets wet, especially if it's super dry for a long period of time, the sand gets very powdery. And when it gets wet, it is very slippery. Like we had one downpour, and you literally had to take little tiny steps or you're falling. I can imagine if it was just a slight pit, you're not getting out. It's so slick. I mean, we were falling all over the place. And when we finally got in the cafeteria or in the chow hall, everyone was so relieved to be on solid ground. It was a mess. I mean, it gave us a different idea, but I thought that too. Maybe his chariot didn't do well and the horses weren't doing well. But Elijah also, I mean...
But I like the Usain Bolt image of Elijah.
I do too.
I don't know if that's exactly what's being described here.
The Flash.
But something happened here. And I think it has to do, again, with this idea of the Lord is showing himself to be in control. That even the prophet of the Lord seems to have moved about unhindered by whatever was slowing down Ahab. And in the end, I don't know exactly what went on in this story. But what I do know is that the Lord is the God of gods, that there is no one who is capable of overpowering him. And even today, if you have instances where you're experiencing strange or unusual things, you need to know that there are territorial spirits. That's true. But Jesus is with you, and that there is no power on earth that is capable of standing in the presence of God. And so, renew your relationship with your master. Speak to the Lord. Ask him to forgive you of your sins and to restore a right relationship with him. And so, my friends, I appreciate you traveling to 1 Kings with me, and we will talk to you some other time.